The ice-crusted hellscape of Titan wasn't exactly a dream vacation spot. Unless, of course, your idea of fun was freezing your ass off while dodging machine-worshipping lunatics and filling out endless bureaucratic forms. Which, for Dr. Zephyr Falk, it kind of was. He stood hunched over a bizarre artifact half buried in the ice, one hand holding a scanner, the other scratching his unkempt hair. "I swear, this thing looks like a toaster that got busy with a Rubik's Cube," Zephyr muttered, squinting at its cryptic runes. His companions, a pair of equally disgruntled researchers, loomed behind him like nervous shadows. "You sure it's not just a piece of junk that fell off one of those cultist drones?" asked Prisha, her voice dripping with the kind of skepticism that only came from long hours of babysitting Dr. Falk's eccentricities. "If it is," replied Zephyr, grinning like a madman, "it's the weirdest damn hunk of metal I've ever seen, and trust me, I've seen some weird metal." Hank, the other researcher, rolled his eyes. "Let's hope it doesn't start chanting binary at us," Zephyr chuckled. "If it does, I might just join the cult." At least they get cool hats. The human embassy on Titan was a fortress of red tape and bad coffee, nestled in the shadow of Saturn's rings, a place where diplomacy was as frozen as the methane lakes outside. Inside its walls, a cold war simmered between Earth's bureaucrats and the fanatical machine cultists. Dr. Falk and his team were supposed to be the peacekeepers, but they were more like janitors cleaning up after humanity's mess. "So, what's our play here?" Prisha asked, pulling her jacket tighter, not that it helped much against Titan's soul-sucking chill. Zephyr shrugged theatrically. "We take it back, poke it with some science, and hope it doesn't explode." "Solid plan," Hank deadpanned. "Because it's not like everything else around here is a ticking time bomb." The trio lugged the artifact back toward the embassy, their breath steaming in the air like tiny clouds of despair. The corridors of the human outpost were as welcoming as a tax audit, the sterile fluorescent lights doing their best to mimic a sun that didn't give a damn about them anymore. Zephyr dumped the artifact on a lab table with all the grace of a sleep-deprived elephant. "There you go, folks," he announced. "Titan's latest gift to humanity, probably less dangerous than last week's cultural exchange." Prisha snorted. "You mean the one where the cultists swapped our diplomatic envoy for a crate of malfunctioning robot arms?" "Yep," Zephyr replied, grinning. "Still trying to shake hands with those bastards." Hank leaned over the artifact, tapping it cautiously. "What's your bet? Alien tech, ancient toaster, an elaborate practical joke." Zephyr tapped his chin, pretending to ponder. "I'm gonna go with ancient alien toaster joke." The lab door slid open with a hiss, admitting Chief Diplomat Avery, looking as if he'd just discovered a new level of stress. "Dr. Falk," he barked, "please tell me you've got something that can distract the council from the fact that we've got a cult forming in our backyard." Zephyr gestured at the artifact. "How about this shiny little number?" Avery frowned at the object like it had personally insulted him. "And what exactly is it?" "A mystery wrapped in an enigma, sprinkled with a dash of what the hell is that?" Zephyr replied cheerfully. "Or, just alien junk." Avery sighed, rubbing his temples. "Can we at least say it's potentially useful alien junk?" "Oh, absolutely," Zephyr nodded. "It could be a paperweight or maybe a doorstop. The possibilities are endless." The diplomat pinched the bridge of his nose, eyes scrunched as if praying for patience. "Just make sure it's not a bomb. Or worse, something that makes the cultists think they're right about their divine machine god." "Wouldn't dream of it," Zephyr replied, his tone as innocent as a fox in a henhouse. As Avery stormed out, the trio returned to their makeshift science project, prodding the artifact with various instruments. It hummed ominously, lights flickering in a sequence that could mean anything from "hello" to "your doom is nigh." "I've seen lava lamps more intimidating," Prisha remarked, watching the colors dance across its surface. Zephyr patted the device affectionately. "Maybe it's just a misunderstood art piece. Or the world's weirdest interstellar SOS," Hank suggested. "If it is," Zephyr mused, "then someone's in for a surprise. Let's just hope it's not us." They worked late into the night, Titan's eternal darkness pressing against the windows like an uninvited guest. Conversations turned into mutterings, and optimism slowly crumbled in the face of exhaustion. "Why do we even bother?" Prisha muttered, her voice tinged with the kind of existential dread that only a midnight shift can bring. Zephyr shrugged, his eyes fixed on the artifact as if it held all the answers in the universe. "Because it's either this, or we start praying to the machine god." Hank chuckled. "And I'd rather deal with alien puzzles than join a doomsday cult." "Hear, hear," Zephyr agreed, lifting an imaginary glass. "To solving the mysteries of the universe and not getting blown up in the process." As the hours ticked by, the artifact remained stubbornly silent, its secrets locked away behind inscrutable symbols and inscrutable, non-existent locks. It was like trying to read an alien language written on the inside of a black hole. "Well, this was productive," Prisha yawned, stretching her arms. "Let's call it a night." "A cold, miserable night," Zephyr nodded, reluctantly tearing his gaze from the enigmatic hunk of metal. "We'll hit it again tomorrow. Maybe fresh eyes will see what bleary ones can't. Or maybe," Hank added with a wry grin, "we'll just find out it's a cosmic paperweight." They left the lab, the lights flickering off behind them like a final curtain call on a play no one was sure was worth watching. The embassy's corridors were silent, a ghost town in steel and plastic, humanity's last bastion on a moon that didn't care. As they parted ways to their respective quarters, Zephyr couldn't shake the feeling that the artifact was more than just an inert piece of alien trash. It called to him, whispered in the language of forgotten stars and long-dead civilizations. Lying in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't help but think of the old saying, "Curiosity killed the cat." Well, Zephyr Falk wasn't a cat, but he was curious, and tomorrow he'd see just how far that curiosity could stretch before something snapped. With that comforting thought, he drifted into a troubled sleep, dreams filled with visions of ancient toasters and cosmic riddles. The next morning, Zephyr woke to the sound of alarms blaring and the embassy shaking like a maraca in a samba band. "What now?" he groaned, rolling out of bed and stumbling into yesterday's clothes. Prisha was already in the corridor, hair askew and eyes wide with panic. "Zephyr, the artifact, it's doing something." His heart leapt into his throat, a mix of excitement and dread. "What kind of something?" "The kind that makes the cultists chant louder and the diplomats run for cover." Zephyr sprinted to the lab, Prisha hot on his heels. They skidded to a halt in front of the artifact, which was now glowing like a miniature sun, casting eerie shadows across the room. Hank was already there, staring at the device with a look that was equal parts awe and terror. "I think we woke it up," he whispered. Zephyr approached cautiously, the hum now a low, resonant thrum that vibrated in his bones. "This is either the best or worst thing that could happen," he said, voice laced with grim humor. Prisha crossed her arms, trying to look unimpressed despite the situation. "I just hope it doesn't turn into a giant alien blender and puree us all." "Noted," Zephyr replied, his mind racing with possibilities and pitfalls. "Let's see if we can talk to it before it decides to do anything drastic." The artifact pulsed softly, as if listening, waiting. A million questions danced on Zephyr's tongue, each one more ridiculous than the last. But in the end, only one made it past his lips. "Hello, mystery box," he said, grinning at the absurdity of it all. "Care to introduce yourself?" The lights flickered, and for a moment, just a moment, Zephyr could have sworn he heard something. A whisper of stars, a voice carried on the solar winds. Then it was gone, leaving only silence and the echo of possibilities. "Well," Zephyr said, turning to his team with a shrug that said more than words ever could, "at least it didn't explode." "Yet, small victories," Prisha agreed, her smile wry and filled with the kind of hope that only the damned can muster. Zephyr nodded, feeling the weight of the universe settle on his shoulders. "Let's see if we can turn this small victory into something bigger, before we end up on the wrong side of a cosmic joke." As they set to work, the artifact hummed softly, a melody of potential and peril that only they could hear. And somewhere deep within its alien circuitry, something awakened, a presence older and stranger than humanity could ever imagine. But that was a problem for future Zephyr. Present Zephyr had a more immediate concern, keeping his curiosity from killing more than just the proverbial cat. With a wry grin and a heart full of reckless determination, he dove into the mystery head first, ready to unravel the secrets of the stars. Or die trying. Zephyr Falk snapped awake to the blaring of alarms, the kind that suggested the universe had decided to throw a party and forgotten to invite him until the last minute. It was a sound that could curdle milk and ruin a perfectly good REM cycle. Tripping over his boots, he pulled them on without bothering with the laces and stumbled out into the corridor where Prisha was waiting, looking like she'd been dragged through a hedge backward. Her hair was doing its best impersonation of a static field. The artifact, Zeph, it's glowing. Great, Zephyr groaned, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Maybe it'll make us some toast while it's at it. They raced to the lab, feet slapping against the cold metal floors like a pair of frantic rats, in a maze designed by a particularly sadistic scientist. Hank was already there, eyeing the artifact as if it were a particularly suspicious burrito. "You know," Hank quipped, "I once had a microwave do the same thing right before it nuked my leftover chili." Zephyr took a moment to marvel at the artifact. It was pulsing with a rhythmic light, hypnotic in its alien strangeness like a disco ball from hell. "I hope it didn't set a timer for detonation." Prisha was already scanning the artifact, her device whirring softly. "It's emitting some kind of signal. But I can't tell if it's calling for reinforcements or ordering an intergalactic pizza." Zephyr frowned. "Maybe it's just trying to phone home. Let's hope E.T. doesn't have a grudge," Hank muttered, keeping a wary distance from the artifact. As they debated the nature of their newly awakened mystery, the embassy's intercom crackled to life, a voice so strained it sounded like it might snap in half. It was Chief Diplomat Avery, the poor bastard probably regretting every life choice that had led him to this particular shitshow. "Dr. Falk, whatever you've done, stop it. The cultists are getting enthusiastic." "Enthusiastic," Zephyr echoed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Prisha peered out the window, her face paling slightly. "I think it means they're gearing up for a parade, with torches." "And possibly pitchforks," Zephyr grimaced. "Guess we're the Grand Marshals," Hank snorted. "I always wanted to lead a parade, just not at the head of an angry mob." Avery's voice droned back over the intercom. "The High Priest Arcturus himself has requested an audience, wants to know what divine favor you're summoning." Zephyr raised an eyebrow. "Divine favor? I was just hoping for a nice light show. Maybe some fireworks." "Well, he's convinced you've called down a miracle, or a calamity. Hard to tell with those nutjobs." The three of them exchanged glances, the weight of the situation pressing down like a particularly heavy blanket on a warm night. "So," Prisha said, scratching the back of her neck, "what's the plan, fearless leader?" Zephyr grinned, the kind of grin that suggested he might have finally lost his marbles. "We meet them, of course, with plenty of charm and absolutely no idea what we're doing." As they made their way to the meeting chamber, Hank nudged Prisha. "Think the High Priest wants to see if we can part the seas or just make the coffee machine work again?" Prisha rolled her eyes. "Pretty sure they'd worship you as a god if you managed to fix that monstrosity." The meeting chamber was about as welcoming as a dentist's office, all sterile surfaces and uncomfortable chairs. High Priest Arcturus stood at the far end, a tall, imposing figure draped in robes that looked like someone had let a toddler loose with a bucket of paint and a flair for the dramatic. Zephyr approached with the confidence of a man who had nothing left to lose. "High Priest Arcturus, a pleasure to meet you under such illuminating circumstances." Arcturus' gaze was like a shark sizing up dinner. "Dr. Falk," he intoned, voice deep enough to resonate in your bones, "you have awakened the machine god. We felt its presence stir." "Awakened it, huh?" Zephyr replied, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "I was really just trying to figure out if it could make waffles." Arcturus didn't blink. "You jest, but the divine has chosen you. The signal is a message from the stars themselves." Hank leaned over to Prisha, stage whispering, Bet he got that line from a bad sci-fi flick. Prisha stifled a laugh, covering it with a cough as Zephyr continued. Well, if it's a message, we're still figuring out the translation. You know how it is with ancient languages. Arcturus nodded sagely as if he understood the burdens of cosmic translation. We shall aid you. The machine gods must be deciphered. Fantastic, Zephyr said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I was hoping for a team effort. Back in the lab, the cultists set up shop, their presence a mixture of incense and intensity that rivaled the best of Burning Man. Arcturus hovered near the artifact, murmuring in a language that sounded like a cat learning to play the bagpipes. Zephyr, Prisha, and Hank sat in a corner trying to appear productive. Prisha was doing her best to maintain a poker face as she whispered, "So what's the backup plan if this thing decides to go all Godzilla on us?" Zephyr shrugged. "Run, scream, hide behind a stronger diplomat." "Solid," Hank said dryly. "Glad to know we're prepared." As they watched, the artifact suddenly brightened, its pulsing light quickening. The room fell silent, the only sound Arcturus' fervent whispers growing louder. Zephyr felt a chill crawl up his spine that had nothing to do with Titan's cold. He leaned closer to Prisha and Hank. "Okay, this might be a good time to start panicking." Prisha nodded, eyes widening as the artifact emitted a low hum that resonated in her bones. "If this thing turns out to be a cosmic blender, remind me to haunt you." "Noted," Zephyr replied, lips twitching into a wry smile. "I'll leave a note for your ghost." Just then, Arcturus turned, and for the first time, Zephyr saw a flash of uncertainty in the High Priest's eyes. "The machine god speaks," he announced, though the confidence in his voice wavered. Zephyr felt a knot of dread twist in his stomach. "We should probably find out what it's saying before we all end up as star dust." The artifact hummed again, louder this time, its glow filling the room with a light that was almost blinding. Zephyr had the strange sensation that it was looking at him, though it had no eyes, no face, nothing that should have suggested consciousness. "Zephyr," Prisha hissed, gripping his arm, "are we about to find out what's on the other side of that cosmic door?" Zephyr swallowed hard, the taste of fear sharp on his tongue. "I guess we're about to find out if curiosity really does kill." As the light reached a crescendo, the room seemed to shift, the air thickening with something that felt ancient and powerful. Zephyr realized with a sinking feeling that they had indeed awoken something, and it was listening. The artifact's hum settled into a steady tone, a melody that played in the back of Zephyr's mind like a song he should have remembered. The cultists around Arcturus began to chant, their voices rising in a chorus that felt both reverent and terrifyingly earnest. Prisha pulled out her scanner, the device trembling slightly in her hands. "Zephyr, the energy levels are off the charts. This thing, it's alive." Hank raised an eyebrow. "Like alive alive? Or just, metaphorically alive like my morning coffee before it kicks in?" Zephyr wasn't sure he wanted to know. But one thing was clear. The artifact was more than just a toaster or a cosmic joke. It was a beacon, a call, something that reached out into the void and stirred something that had lain dormant for far too long. And now, as the cultist chant filled the room, as the artifact pulsed with a life of its own, Zephyr knew that whatever they had awakened was not going back to sleep anytime soon. "Well, this is going to be fun," he muttered to himself, hoping that his sarcasm could keep the fear at bay. "Fun," Hank echoed with a nod, "in a we might die screaming kind of way." Zephyr felt a grin tugging at his lips despite everything. "Why not? Let's see what the universe has in store for us. Besides, I hear cosmic mysteries are all the rage these days." As they prepared to face whatever cosmic entity had been roused from its slumber, Zephyr couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, he'd bitten off more than he could chew this time. But it was too late for regrets. The die was cast, the artifact awakened, and the only way out was forward. And so, with a heart full of fear and a mind brimming with questions, Zephyr Falk stepped into the unknown, ready to confront whatever cosmic forces awaited them on this icy, unforgiving moon. The hum of the artifact had a stomach-churning quality, like a song you couldn't quite remember but knew you'd regret hearing in full. It resonated through the room, vibrating in everyone's bones and setting the stage for whatever cosmic mess was about to unfold. Zephyr Falk stood there, drumming his fingers against the edge of the lab table, trying to ignore the dread that clawed at his insides like a cat with a vendetta. Prisha was staring at her scanner as if it might suddenly sprout arms and slap some sense into the situation. "Zephyr, if this thing decides to blow, I'm blaming you." "Noted. I'll make sure my eulogy includes an apology," Zephyr replied, throwing a glance at Hank, who was busy making eyes at a coffee cup as though it might provide divine inspiration. The intercom crackled to life with all the charm of a dying fish. Chief Diplomat Avery's voice came through, sounding about as pleased as a man who just realized he was standing in the wrong line at the DMV. "Dr. Falk, could you please explain why the communication systems are down? Oh, and why the temperature in my office is dropping faster than my patient's?" Zephyr sighed, rubbing his temples. "Just another day on Titan, Chief. We've got a cosmic magic 8-ball on the fritz over here." "Lovely. Well, fix it. The cultists are getting restless and cold," Avery snapped, and the intercom went silent again, presumably to go sulk in a corner. "Right," Zephyr muttered. "Because fixing alien artifacts is just another Wednesday." Prisha glanced over. "Think the artifact's brushing up on its feng shui. Maybe it just wanted a little redecorating." Hank snorted, finally putting down the coffee. "Sure, and next it'll be asking us to install some mood lighting." As if responding to their sarcasm, the artifact's glow intensified, casting odd shadows that stretched across the walls like the world's worst abstract art. Zephyr couldn't help but feel like a bug under a magnifying glass, waiting to catch fire. "Okay, this is getting weird," Prisha said, her voice laced with the kind of tension that suggested she was about 2 seconds from considering a career change. "We need a plan." "Good idea," Zephyr replied, though he was fresh out of plans, good or otherwise. "Who we got on the station that might have a clue about cosmic disco balls?" Hank shrugged. "Riven Keats. If anyone can make sense of this, it's her." Zephyr nodded. Riven was the embassy's chief engineer and resident miracle worker. If you handed her a paperclip and a rubber band, she'd build you a toaster. Probably one that could make stellar waffles, too. "Let's hope she's not busy building a spaceship out of a tin can." "Could use her genius right about now," Zephyr said, striding towards the lab's exit with Hank and Prisha in tow. They found Riven hunched over a mass of wires and blinking lights in engineering, her expression a blend of concentration and the kind of irritation that came from knowing the universe was about to dump a load of nonsense in your lap. Again. "Riven," Zephyr said, "we might have awakened something big, shiny, and prone to mood swings." She looked up, her eyes narrowing in that way that suggested she was calculating the odds of strangling him with a power cable. "You broke it, you fix it." "I'm not exactly running a cosmic repair shop here." "True, but you're the closest thing we've got to a miracle worker," Prisha interjected, flashing a grin that was more desperation than charm. Riven grunted, standing up and brushing her hands on her grease-streaked pants. "All right, show me your newest disaster." Back in the lab, she approached the artifact with the caution of someone meeting their ex at a party. "What am I looking at?" "A cosmic Rubik's Cube with a death wish, apparently," Hank offered helpfully. "Great," Riven muttered. "Okay, let's see if we can keep this place from turning into a popsicle." The ambient temperature was indeed dropping, with frost creeping along the edges of the room like an unwanted guest. Riven set to work, her focus a testament to human stubbornness in the face of impending doom. She pulled out a portable shield generator, muttering under her breath about idiot researchers and their penchant for playing with interstellar fire. "If we can create a barrier, it might contain the artifact's side effects." Zephyr watched her work, both impressed and aware that he was probably in over his head. "Do your magic, Riven." "We could use a little less chaos right now." As Riven made adjustments, tweaking settings with the precision of a surgeon, the room's lights flickered ominously. The artifact hummed again, sending a new wave of unease washing over them. "Is this thing alive?" Riven asked, glancing up briefly. "Depends on your definition," Prisha replied, though her voice held little optimism. "I'd say more like a really temperamental pet." Riven snorted. "Well, let's hope it doesn't need house training." Eventually, the shield generator flared to life, encircling the artifact in a shimmering barrier that seemed to dampen its more obnoxious tendencies. The temperature in the room stabilized, and for the first time in Ior's, Zephyr felt like he might not end up as a human icicle. "Nice work," Zephyr said, genuinely impressed. "Maybe we should just let you handle all alien artifacts from now on." "Don't flatter yourself," Riven replied, though a hint of a smile tugged at her lips. "I'm charging double next time." Hank clapped a hand on Zephyr's shoulder. "Looks like we live to screw up another day. Assuming the universe doesn't throw us another curveball," Prisha added, her tone drier than Titan's atmosphere. Just then the intercom buzzed back to life, Avery's voice cutting through with the charm of nails on a chalkboard. "Dr. Falk, the cultists are demanding to know what's happening. They think this is some kind of holy trial." Zephyr sighed deeply. "Tell them it's more of a technical glitch with divine aspirations. And maybe offer them a blanket," Prisha suggested. "Might keep the torches at bay for a bit." With the shield holding steady, Zephyr took a moment to consider their next move. They'd managed to contain the immediate threat, but the underlying problem remained. An artifact with a mind of its own and a cosmic agenda nobody could decipher. "Riven, any chance we can figure out what this thing is actually trying to say?" Zephyr asked, hopeful despite himself. Riven crossed her arms, eyeing the artifact like it owed her money. "Not without a hell of a lot more data and maybe a miracle. So basically we're screwed," Hank summarized. "Pretty much," Riven confirmed with a shrug. Zephyr turned to his team, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down like a boulder in a cartoon chase scene. "All right, gang, let's keep our eyes open and our sarcasm sharp. Who knows, we might just stumble our way through this." Prisha chuckled. "If we don't end up getting toasted. Or frozen," Hank added, gesturing at the icy patches that hadn't quite melted yet. "Either way, we'll make it interesting," Riven said, heading back to her engineering domain with the air of someone who knew that fixing one problem only meant two more would pop up to take its place. Zephyr turned to watch the artifact, still encased within its shimmering barrier. This was far from over. Whatever cosmic forces were at play, they were just getting started, and it was up to him and his band of questionably competent misfits to make sense of it. "Here's hoping for a quiet night," he said, knowing full well that fate had no intention of complying. "Quiet's overrated," Prisha replied, still smiling, though her eyes betrayed the anxiety she kept hidden behind jokes and sarcasm. Together they stood in the lab, waiting for the next move in this cosmic game of chess where they were just as likely to find themselves swept off the board as crowned kings. "Let's see what happens," Zephyr finally said, his voice carrying a note of determination that felt foreign even to him. "Whatever this thing is, we'll face it like we do everything else, with fear and trembling," Hank quipped. "And a touch of gallows humor," Prisha added, raising an imaginary glass. Zephyr grinned, feeling a strange camaraderie in their shared predicament. "To whatever cosmic insanity awaits us, may we meet it head-on and laugh in its face." And with that they prepared for whatever came next, knowing that in the vast, unpredictable expanse of space, survival was as much about resilience as it was about sheer, unadulterated luck. The day on Titan began like any other, cold, miserable, and a perfect metaphor for Zephyr's current mental state. Not that Zephyr Falk was the type to brood. No, brooding was for those who didn't have a cosmic toaster with a god complex on their hands. Instead, he found himself chuckling darkly as he waded through the latest disaster the universe had cheerfully gifted him. It didn't take long for the cultists to escalate matters. No sooner had Zephyr managed to stabilize the temperature in the lab than the corridors of the station started to echo with the kind of chants that only bored zealots could muster. The cultists, or as Zephyr liked to call them, Titan's least wanted, were starting to think the artifact was the key to enlightenment, or at least to a new and improved apocalypse. Either way, they were enthusiastic, which was a problem for everyone else. Zephyr pushed through the throng of people crowding the hallways, his patience fraying at the edges more than his lab coat. "Just what I needed," he muttered to himself, "a choir of lunatics and a mystery cube that thinks it's an opera singer." Prisha appeared beside him, her expression one part concern, two parts, "Why do I even bother?" She held her scanner like a talisman, though its beeping had become more intermittent, a bad sign in any context. "Zephyr, the readings are getting worse. It's like this thing's gearing up for a performance, and we don't have a ticket." "Great," Zephyr replied, sarcasm dripping as heavily as the condensation on the windows. "Just what we need. An alien artifact with stage fright." Their banter was interrupted by a new wave of chanting, this time echoing down the corridor from the main chamber where the cultists had gathered. The sound was unsettling, like 1,000 rusty gears clashing in symphony. "Sounds like they're really getting into it," Prisha observed, craning her neck to get a better look. There was a grim inevitability to the way the cultists moved, like a swarm of ants following an unseen pheromone trail. "It's a good thing enthusiasm isn't a power source," Zephyr commented. "Otherwise, we'd be in trouble." They found Hank lounging against the wall, coffee cup in hand, looking about as interested in the proceedings as a cat at a dog show. "Hey, if they start sacrificing something, let me know," he said with a lazy grin. "I could use the entertainment." Riven arrived, the perpetual grease smudge on her cheek somehow managing to look more dignified than half the people in the room. "What's the latest?" she asked, her tone suggesting she was already regretting asking. Zephyr gestured towards the cultists. "They've decided the glowing cube might be their new deity. We're just trying to keep it from becoming their ticket to the afterlife." Riven shook her head, her frustration palpable. "And I thought fixing engines was bad." "What are we doing about it?" "Well, I considered sending them a strongly worded memo," Zephyr deadpanned, "but I doubt they'd read it." "Maybe we could just unplug the damn thing and call it a day," Hank suggested, though even he didn't seem convinced by his own suggestion. "Sure," Prisha said dryly. "And then maybe we'll get lucky and it won't blow up in our faces." Zephyr turned his attention back to the artifact, still encased in its shimmering barrier. The shield had held, but the problem wasn't going away. Something needed to be done before the cultists' enthusiasm turned into something more dangerous. "Okay, team," he said, trying to sound more authoritative than he felt. "We need a plan and we need it fast. How about running away?" Hank suggested, though his tone was more hopeful than serious. "Tempting," Zephyr admitted. "But no, we need to figure out what this thing wants and how to make it stop." Riven sighed, folding her arms. "Would have been nice if whoever built this thing left an instruction manual." Prisha gave a small, humorless laugh. "Yeah, but where's the fun in that?" Before Zephyr could respond, the station's PA system crackled to life, barely audible over the chant of the cultists. Chief Diplomat Avery's voice came through, carrying the kind of urgency usually reserved for impending asteroid impacts. "Dr. Falk, we've got a situation. The cultists are demanding an audience. They think the artifact is calling them." Zephyr grimaced. "Can't they just send it a text?" "No such luck," Avery replied. "They want to commune with it and they're getting impatient. I need you to handle this before it turns into a full-blown diplomatic incident. Because we wouldn't want to upset the fine balance of peace we've got going on here," Zephyr muttered sarcastically. "All right, I'll talk to them." Prisha gave him a dubious look. You're not exactly what I'd call a people person." "Hey, I can be charming," Zephyr protested, though he knew full well she was right. "Besides, it's not like we have many options." With that, he headed towards the main chamber where the cultists had gathered, Riven, Prisha, and Hank trailing behind. The room was already filled to capacity, the air thick with the scent of incense and fervor. Zephyr approached the leader, a man with the kind of wild-eyed intensity that suggested he was either deeply spiritual or just hadn't slept in weeks. "Hello," Zephyr began, trying to sound diplomatic. "I hear you think the artifact is talking to you." The leader nodded, eyes wide and gleaming. "It is a sign, a message from beyond the stars." "Right?" Zephyr said, doing his best to sound impressed. "And what exactly is it saying?" The leader paused, clearly not expecting to be questioned so directly. "It speaks of a new dawn, a path to enlightenment." Zephyr raised an eyebrow. "And it said all that while looking like a toaster." Around him, the cultists murmured, their enthusiasm undiminished by Zephyr's skepticism. Prisha elbowed him, whispering, "Don't antagonize them. We're trying to calm things down, remember." Zephyr grimaced but nodded, turning back to the leader. "Look, I get that this seems important to you, but we need to make sure it's safe. I mean, for all we know, it could be trying to order a pizza." The leader blinked, clearly taken aback by the suggestion. "Pizza?" "Yeah," Zephyr said with a shrug. "If we're lucky, that's all it wants." Hank, hovering nearby, leaned in. "Or maybe it wants a sacrifice. It's a cosmic toss-up." The cultists shifted, their fervor dimming ever so slightly under the weight of doubt. It was a small victory, but Zephyr would take what he could get. "Listen," he said, addressing the crowd, "we're doing everything we can to figure out what's going on, but for now we need to keep things calm. No one wants this to end in disaster." Riven, never one for idle chit-chat, stepped forward. "And if it does, well, we'll just blame Zephyr. He's the one with the PhD." The cultists chuckled nervously, their mood lightening just enough to diffuse the immediate tension. Zephyr shot Riven a grateful glance, knowing her intervention might have saved them from a riot. As the crowd began to disperse, Zephyr let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Well, that went better than expected." Prisha nodded, though her expression was still clouded with concern. "But it doesn't solve the underlying problem. What happens if we can't figure this out before they lose patience?" Zephyr didn't have an answer for that, and judging by the looks on his colleagues' faces, neither did they. All they could do was keep working, hoping to unravel the mystery before it unraveled them. Back in the lab, Zephyr pored over the data, looking for patterns that might suggest a solution. The readings were erratic, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was a logic beneath the chaos. "Anything?" Riven asked, peering over his shoulder. Zephyr shook his head. "Nothing yet." "But we've got to keep trying," she sighed, leaning against the table. "You know, they say nothing worth doing is ever easy." "Yeah?" Zephyr said with a smirk. "Well, they clearly never had to deal with homicidal kitchen appliances." Prisha chuckled, though her laughter was tinged with exhaustion. "Here's hoping we can solve this before it turns into a cosmic game of hot potato. Or before the toaster decides it's time for breakfast," Hank added, ever the pessimist. With a grim determination, they continued their work, knowing that each passing moment brought them closer to a resolution, or disaster. And as they labored, the artifact remained silent, its intentions unreadable, its mysteries unresolved. For Zephyr Falk and his team, the night was far from over, and there were no guarantees of triumph. Only the certainty of struggle and the hope that somewhere in the chaos they might find a path through the dark. As the Iors dragged by, the reality of their situation weighed heavily on them all, a constant reminder that in the vastness of space, there were no easy answers, only the promise of more questions to come. "So what's the plan?" Prisha asked finally, breaking the silence. Zephyr shrugged, exhaustion evident in every movement. "We keep working and hope we don't end up talking to our own cosmic toaster." And with that, they returned to their tasks, aware that whatever happened next was beyond their control, but not their determination to face it head-on. The air inside the embassy on Titan was heavy with a sense of impending doom. It wasn't just the artifact's insistent hum that grated on everyone's nerves. It was the knowledge that the cosmic toaster was gearing up for its finale, and it wasn't going to be a quiet one. The defenses of the embassy, once considered impenetrable, were now as reliable as a chocolate teapot. "Doctor." Zephyr Falk leaned back in his creaky chair, staring at the blinking data on the console as if sheer force of will could change it. No luck there. The readouts were as erratic as a mood-swinging teenager, and twice as infuriating. Prisha shuffled in, her scanner flickering in her hand like it had stage fright. "I think I've finally figured out what's wrong with this thing," she announced, her voice a mix of triumph and resignation. Zephyr gave her a sidelong glance. "Let me guess it's allergic to bullshit, because that's in high supply around here." Prisha managed a tired smile. "No, it's picking up some kind of pattern in the signals we've been getting. I think the artifact might be trying to communicate." Zephyr rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache born from equal parts frustration and caffeine deprivation. "Of course it is. Because a homicidal kitchen appliance with communication issues is just what we need right now." Hank sauntered over, coffee cup in hand, the eternal optimist of impending doom. "So, what's the plan? We gonna hug it out with the toaster or what?" Zephyr rolled his eyes. "I'm thinking more long-distance relationship if you ask me. But first, we need to figure out what it's saying before it decides to send us a message we can't ignore." Riven, always the voice of practical pessimism, joined them, her boots clanking on the metal floor. "And if we can't, what's the backup plan? Hope it loses interest and floats off into space. Preferably without us," Zephyr replied, sarcasm his only shield against the abyss of uncertainty they faced. "But I'm open to suggestions. Anyone got a spare cosmic translator lying around?" Their conversation was interrupted by the embassy's alarm system, which chose that moment to screech to life, a banshee wail of impending catastrophe. Chief Diplomat Avery's voice crackled over the intercom, and it was clear from the get-go that he was in rare form. "Attention, all personnel. I need solutions, not excuses," Avery barked, sounding like a man on the edge of his last nerve. "The artifact's energy levels are spiking. I want Falk and his team in the main control room now." Zephyr pushed himself up from his chair with a groan, feeling as if the weight of Titan's gravity had quadrupled. "You heard the man," he said, turning to his team. "Let's not keep destiny waiting." Prisha, Hank, and Riven fell in step behind him, their expressions a mix of determination and the kind of weary resignation that comes from knowing you're about to tackle a problem way above your pay grade. As they hustled toward the control room, Zephyr couldn't help but notice the cracks starting to show in the embassy's defenses. The once gleaming corridors were now dimly lit, the emergency lights casting an eerie, flickering glow over everything. If the place had a heart, it was definitely on its last few beats. The control room was a hive of activity, or maybe chaos was a more accurate term. Technicians and diplomats buzzed around, trying to stave off the inevitable with a mix of frantic button pushing and nervous caffeine consumption. Avery was at the center of it all, looking like a man who just realized his parachute was a backpack full of bricks. "Falk," he called out, waving them over with a sense of urgency usually reserved for dealing with rabid animals or unpaid parking tickets. "I hope you have some good news, because we're running out of time, patience, and caffeine." Zephyr spared a glance at the central display, where the artifact's energy levels were climbing like a roller coaster on a suicide mission. "Well, the good news is that I think the artifact is trying to communicate," he said, his tone suggesting that the term good news was being applied very loosely. "And the bad news?" Avery prompted, though the look on his face suggested he already knew the answer. "The bad news is that if we can't figure out what it's saying soon, the next thing it communicates might be a crater where this embassy used to be." Avery grimaced, which for him was practically a breakdown. "So, how do we make it talk? Or at least get it to stop before it blows us all to hell?" Zephyr exchanged a glance with Prisha, who nodded in silent agreement. "We think we might be able to use the scanner to modulate the artifact's signals. Basically, we talk to it in its own language, convince it to power down." Hank snorted. "Sure, because that worked out so well with my ex." Ignoring him, Zephyr continued. "The trouble is, it's risky. If we miscalculate, it might interpret our message as a declaration of war." Riven crossed her arms, her expression as steely as ever. "So what you're saying is it's a cosmic coin toss. Talk to it and it might listen, or it might blow us sky high." "Basically, yeah," Zephyr confirmed. "But it's the only shot we've got." Avery nodded, his decision made for lack of better options. Then get to it, Falk. And for what it's worth, good luck. Not that I believe in it, but desperate times and all that. Zephyr and his team hustled over to the artifact, the room around them buzzing with tension and the occasional spark of malfunctioning equipment. As they approached, the artifact's hum intensified, a low, thrumming note that set their teeth on edge. "All right," Zephyr said, taking a deep breath. "Let's see if we can make some history, or at least avoid becoming it." Prisha adjusted the scanner, her fingers deftly manipulating the controls. "I've set the scanner to transmit on the same frequency as the artifact's emissions," she explained, her focus absolute. "We should be able to send a signal that it can understand, hopefully without triggering Armageddon." Hank crossed his fingers, though whether it was for luck or as a ward against impending doom was anyone's guess. "Just remember, if this doesn't work, I want it on record that I was always more of a waffle guy." "Noted," Zephyr said, trying to inject some levity into the situation. "All right, Prisha." "Do it." With a nod, Prisha activated the scanner, sending a pulse of modulated energy toward the artifact. For a tense moment, nothing happened, the room holding its collective breath as hope and dread waged a silent war. Then slowly, the artifact's hum began to change, the dissonant noise shifting into something that was almost musical. It was as if the cosmic toaster had finally found its voice, and it was singing a song that none of them could understand but all of them felt. The energy levels on the display began to stabilize, the wild fluctuations smoothing out into a steady rhythm. It was working, at least for the moment. Zephyr allowed himself a small, cautious smile. "Well, I'll be damned. Looks like it's listening." "Now what?" Riven asked, her usual skepticism tinged with a hint of hope. "Now we keep it talking," Zephyr replied, "and pray it doesn't decide this conversation is over." As they continued to modulate the signal, the artifact's hum became more complex, almost conversational in its intricacy. It felt as if they were teetering on the edge of understanding, glimpsing a vast, unknowable truth that lay just beyond their grasp. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic pulsing of the artifact and the soft beeping of the monitors. Every soul present knew they were standing at the precipice of something monumental, the line between survival and obliteration drawn thin as a whisper. Then, with a final resonant chord, the artifact powered down, its gleaming surface dimming to a gentle, harmless glow. The threat had passed, at least for now. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room, tension melting away like ice in the sun. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Zephyr felt the weight lift from his shoulders, a sense of accomplishment tempered by the knowledge of how close they had come to disaster. Avery approached, a rare smile softening his features. "Well done, Falk. I knew you had it in you, or at least I hoped you did. Turns out hope pays better than cynicism today." Zephyr chuckled, the sound tinged with exhaustion. "Don't get used to it. Tomorrow's another day, and I'm sure the universe has plenty more curveballs lined up for us." Prisha gave him a pat on the back, her own relief evident in the tired smile she wore. "Let's just hope they're softer ones. I'm getting too old for this kind of heart attack." Hank raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "To survival," he said with a grin. "And to cosmic peace talks with homicidal kitchenware." Riven, ever the stoic, nodded in agreement. "Here's to being around long enough to regret it all." As they stood there, basking in their hard-won victory, Zephyr couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the team around him. They'd faced the abyss together and come out on the other side, a testament not to luck, but to their own resilience and determination. And as the reality of their survival began to sink in, there was only one thing left to do. "All right, team," Zephyr said, clapping his hands together. "Let's get back to work. After all, the day's not over yet, and I'm sure the universe has plenty of surprises left in store for us." With a renewed sense of purpose, they returned to their stations, knowing that whatever the cosmos threw their way next, they'd face it together, armed with nothing more than their wits, their humor, and the unshakable belief that in the end, they'd find a way through. Zephyr Falk stood in the dimly lit room, the hum of the artifact now a soft background murmur. He surveyed the exhausted faces of his team as they slumped back, the adrenaline crash hitting like a freight train. "Well, hopefully that's the last time we try to sweet-talk a cosmic toaster," he said, massaging his temples. "I swear, one day we'll get an artifact that communicates in interpretive dance just to spite us." Riven snorted, crossing her arms with a stiff, mechanical grace. "I'd pay to see that. Hell, might even be more straightforward than what we've been dealing with." Their momentary triumph was cut short as the control room door banged open. Enter the cultists, a group of ragtag believers with the unnerving habit of looking like they'd just stepped out of a dystopian fashion catalog. Their leader, a man named Ashar, was in a perpetual state of disheveled zen, like a monk who'd lost his robe in a poker game. "Ah, Ashar," Zephyr greeted, pulling on his best diplomatic smile. "Come to burn some incense, or are we skipping straight to the sacrifices today?" Ashar's eyes, wide and fervent, took in the artifact, his expression one of reverence and fear. "The artifact spoke to you," he intoned, as if reciting holy scripture. "What did it say? Does it portend the dawn of a new age?" "It mostly just hummed at us," Riven replied with a shrug. "It either wants to be our friend or end us all." 50-50, really. The cultists murmured among themselves, their fervor undiminished by Riven's bluntness. Ashar gestured dramatically, as if trying to convey the gravitas of their situation. "We must understand its will. We believe the artifact holds the key to enlightenment." "And here I thought it just wanted toast," Hank interjected, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Shows what I know." Zephyr waved a hand, trying to dismiss the cultists' apocalyptic musings. "Look, we're working on it. But if it's enlightenment you're after, there's a self-help section tucked away in the back of the embassy library. You might find some enlightening reads." Ashar, undeterred, took a step closer, his gaze fixed on Zephyr. "Our faith in the artifact is unwavering. We believe it chose us to guide humanity towards a new era." "Great," Zephyr said, clapping his hands. "In that case, you can start by guiding yourselves right out of here. We've got enough on our plate without adding cosmic prophecies to the mix." Prisha, having regained some of her composure, leaned in toward Zephyr. "We're going to need a plan, and quickly. If those energy levels spike again, we might not get a second chance." Zephyr nodded, understanding the urgency. "Right. Riven, any brilliant ideas on how to harness the power of an alien toaster without getting zapped into oblivion?" Riven tapped her chin thoughtfully, her usual practicality seasoned with a dash of cynicism. "We could try creating a feedback loop. Use its own energy against it, stabilize the fluctuations. Basically, we turn its power back on itself." "Like cosmic judo," Hank piped in, his grin a welcome bit of levity amidst the tension. "Throwing its weight around until it trips over its own ego." "Exactly," Riven replied, a rare hint of a smile breaking her serious demeanor. "We just have to avoid getting splattered all over the walls in the process." Zephyr turned to Prisha, who was already adjusting the scanner, her fingers moving with the precision of a concert pianist. "Think you can rig it to create the loop?" Prisha nodded, confidence in her eyes. "It'll be tricky, but if we sync the frequencies just right, it could work, or it could blow us all to hell." "You know, standard Tuesday on Titan." "Love your optimism," Zephyr said, giving her a reassuring pat on the back. "Let's make sure this particular Tuesday stays unremarkable then." As Prisha worked, the rest of the team prepared for the possibility of another artifact-induced meltdown. Cables were checked, monitors adjusted, and caffeine supplies replenished, the room buzzing with nervous energy. Avery, ever the reluctant optimist, leaned against a console, watching with a mix of skepticism and hope. "You know, Falk, if this works, you might just have saved us all from becoming space debris." "Wouldn't be the first time," Zephyr quipped, his attention never leaving the artifact. "But let's not order the champagne just yet." The cultists, meanwhile, maintained their vigil, eyes wide with anticipation. Ashar, his faith in the artifact unshaken, offered a few whispered prayers, likely intended to curry favor with whatever cosmic entity they believed inhabited the toaster. "All right," Prisha announced, stepping back from the scanner. "It's ready. We'll have to time this perfectly or we could end up with a very short obituary." Zephyr nodded, the stakes clear. "On three, then. 1, 2. He never got to 3. Before the countdown was completed, the artifact pulsed violently, its surface flaring with a blinding light. The room erupted into chaos as the artifact's energy threatened to spiral out of control. "Now!" Zephyr shouted, adrenaline surging through him. "Hit it, Prisha." Prisha activated the scanner, the device humming to life as it attempted to feed the artifact's energy back into itself. The room trembled as the feedback loop engaged, the air thick with the tension of the unknown. For a moment, it seemed like the gamble might not pay off. The artifact bucked against the loop, its hum reaching a fever pitch. But gradually, the room's vibrations lessened, the chaotic noise smoothing into a steady, manageable rhythm. The artifact's glow dimmed, its power no longer a threat but a controlled force. Silence descended upon the room, punctuated only by the relieved exhalations of those present. "Well, I'll be damned," Hank said, breaking the silence with a chuckle. "Cosmic judo for the win." Zephyr let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, turning to his team with a weary smile. "Nice work, everyone. Let's make a habit of saving the universe, shall we?" Avery, unable to suppress a grin, approached Zephyr. "Looks like you've managed to wrangle the impossible, Falk. Maybe there's a future for you in diplomacy after all." "Don't get ahead of yourself," Zephyr replied, his tone light. "I'm already allergic to bureaucratic nonsense." As the team celebrated their narrow escape from disaster, the cultists approached, their expressions a mix of awe and confusion. Ashar, ever the true believer, spoke with reverence. "You have harnessed the artifact's power. Perhaps you are chosen after all." "Chosen? Nah," Zephyr said, shaking his head. "Just stubborn enough not to take cosmic extermination lying down." Riven, arms crossed, regarded the cultists with a bemused expression. "So what's the plan now, Ashar? You gonna declare us honorary prophets or something?" Ashar looked thoughtful, his eyes flickering with the light of his peculiar faith. "Perhaps. Or perhaps we were meant to witness this moment, to understand that humanity must forge its own path." "Sounds like a cop-out," Hank said with a smirk. "But hey, whatever helps you sleep at night." The cultists, their role in the drama unresolved, retreated to the edges of the room, whispering amongst themselves. The threat of their interference loomed like a shadow, a reminder that even with the artifact stabilized, the situation was anything but secure. Zephyr, aware of the tenuous peace, addressed his team with renewed determination. "All right, folks, we've bought ourselves some time, but let's not get complacent. We still need to figure out what this artifact wants, and why we're the lucky winners of its attention." Prisha, ever the pragmatist, nodded in agreement. "And let's hope it doesn't get any more ideas about spontaneous planet-cleansing events." Avery, his diplomatic demeanor returning, offered a rare moment of camaraderie. "Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. After all, if Titans taught us anything, it's that there's no room for solo acts in survival." Zephyr, feeling the weight of their shared experience, couldn't help but agree. Here's to facing the unknown with a smile and a strong cup of coffee. As they settled back into their roles, the control room once again became a hub of activity. The threat of the artifact might have been contained, but the challenges ahead were as daunting as the cold, inhospitable surface of Titan itself. Yet for now, they had a moment of reprieve, a chance to catch their breath and prepare for whatever cosmic curveball came next. And in the grand scheme of things, that was more than they could have hoped for. And so, with a shared sense of purpose and a healthy dose of snark, they turned back to their work, knowing that in the vast and uncaring universe, all they had was each other, and a cosmic toaster that refused to play by anyone's rules but its own. Zephyr Falk stood amidst the chaos, a reluctant conductor in a symphony of snark and desperation. The cosmic toaster, aka. The artifact had been temporarily quelled, but the air was still thick with a tension that could crack a diamond, or at least a decent egg. "All right, team," Zephyr began, trying to project confidence like a second-rate stage magician. "Now that we've kept the toaster from burning the universe's bread, what's the next step?" Prisha, fiddling with the scanner like it owed her money, shot him a look. "Next step. Find out what this thing wants before it decides to go full apocalyptic blender again." "Great plan," Hank chimed in with his trademark sarcasm. "Any ideas on how to chat with an alien toaster? Maybe offer it a bagel, see if it opens up." Zephyr rolled his eyes, his patience thinner than the coffee they served at the embassy. "If you've got any better ideas, I'm all ears." "Actually," Riven interjected, her tone as dry as the Titan atmosphere, "I've been thinking, what if it's not just a machine but a sentient entity trying to communicate? Maybe we're just not picking up the right signals." "Communicating with a toaster," Avery mused, leaning in with a chuckle. "Only on Titan." Zephyr considered this, his mind racing like a hamster on a wheel. "All right, so we've got a sentient alien toaster that wants to talk. How do we establish contact without blowing ourselves to kingdom come?" Prisha, still engrossed in her device, perked up. "We could try modulating its signal frequencies, see if we can find a common wavelength. It's risky, though. Could make things worse. Worse than cultists in cosmic toast," Hank quipped. "Bring it on." Ashar, who had been lurking like a shadow with lofty ambitions, suddenly piped up. "Perhaps the artifact seeks understanding. We must listen and learn its ways." "Oh, good," Zephyr sighed. "The cosmic guidance counselor has spoken." Ignoring the cultist's fervent murmurings, Zephyr focused back on the task at hand. "Prisha, get those frequencies synced. Riven, keep an eye on the power levels. Hank, make sure we don't accidentally summon an army of toaster minions." "On it, fearless leader," Hank replied, pocketing a wrench like it was his lucky charm. With everyone in position, Prisha began adjusting the scanner. The machine whirred, its lights flickering like a nightclub on the wrong side of town. The artifact's hum shifted, its tone less threatening, more curious. It was like coaxing a cat from under a couch, careful, deliberate, and likely to backfire spectacularly. "Anything?" Zephyr asked, his voice tinged with the anxiety of a man who'd once microwaved a fork. Prisha squinted at the scanner's readout. "I think we've got something. It's pulsing. Like it's trying to mimic us." "Maybe it wants a pen pal," Hank suggested, ever the optimist in a room full of pessimists. Avery leaned closer, intrigued. "If it's mimicking us, maybe it's learning. Perhaps we can teach it to communicate." "Sure," Riven deadpanned. "We'll just need a universal translator or a miracle." Zephyr took a steadying breath. "Let's try a basic signal. Something simple like, 'Hello, hello,'" Hank raised an eyebrow. "Why not throw in a 'how's the weather up there' while you're at it?" Ignoring him, Prisha adjusted the scanner, sending out a signal as basic as their situation was ludicrous. The artifact responded, its glow softening, its hum turning almost melodic. If it was a symphony, it was the kind of music you'd hear in an elevator on the way to your doom. "It's responding," Prisha confirmed, astonishment in her voice. "I think it's curious." Zephyr suppressed a grin. "Curious is good. Curious means less likely to incinerate us." Ashar watched the exchange with a mix of awe and vindication. "The artifact listens to you. It recognizes your wisdom. Or it's just as confused as we are," Riven muttered, her skepticism as reliable as Titan's chill. Zephyr raised his hand to silence the commentary. "If it's listening, let's try to learn something. Ask it why it's here." Prisha nodded, fingers dancing over the controls with the grace of someone who hadn't slept in 48 hours but didn't care anymore. The artifact's response was immediate, a series of pulses that seemed almost thoughtful. "It's like it's telling a story," Prisha said, her eyes widening. "I think it's trying to communicate its purpose." Hank leaned over, peering at the readout. "Great, an alien bedtime story. Hope it's got a happy ending." The artifact's hum grew more complex, the rhythm shifting like a heartbeat. It was a narrative, not in words but in sensations, a tapestry of emotions and intent. Zephyr felt it too, a ripple of understanding passing through him. The artifact wasn't just a machine, it was a being reaching out across the void. "It's lost," Zephyr realized, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "It doesn't want to hurt us. It just wants to go home." A moment of stunned silence followed, broken only by the hum of the artifact. Everyone was processing the revelation, the absurdity of their situation tempered by a newfound empathy. "Home," Riven repeated, her voice softer than usual. "We all get that feeling." Zephyr nodded, a plan forming in his mind. "If we can help it return, maybe we can end this. But how do we direct it without getting caught in its path?" Prisha's gaze was distant, her mind racing ahead. "If we can amplify its signal, send it out to the stars, it might find its way back. But we'll need to stabilize it first." "No more cosmic tantrums." "Tantrums I can handle," Hank said with a smirk. "Just tell me where to hit." Zephyr's grin was weary but genuine. "Not a bad idea. Hank, Riven, check the power relays. We need full stability before we can boost anything." Ashar, looking as though he'd just witnessed a miracle, stepped forward. "We will assist you. Our faith demands we see this through." "Fine," Zephyr conceded, too tired to argue theology with zealots. "Just don't touch anything that looks important." With a flurry of activity that would make any government office blush with envy, the team set about stabilizing the artifact's energy. Wires were rerouted, consoles hummed with a life of their own, and Prisha continued her dance with the scanner, coaxing the alien signal into clarity. Avery, watching with an expression that was equal parts anxiety and admiration, couldn't resist a final quip. "You know, Falk, if you pull this off, I might even go to bat for you in the next round of budget cuts." "Budget cuts?" Zephyr feigned shock. "And here I thought this toaster was already the height of luxury." Finally, with everything in place, Zephyr gave the nod. "All right, let's do this. Prisha, amplify the signal." Prisha's fingers flew over the controls one last time, adjusting frequencies with the care and precision of a heart surgeon on a hangover. The artifact thrummed with power, its glow pulsating with a rhythm that felt almost hopeful. The signal soared through the embassy, radiating out into the cold, indifferent cosmos. The artifact absorbed the energy, responding with a resonance that was both profound and otherworldly. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The artifact, the team, the cultists, all frozen in a tableau of possibility. Then, with a final, gentle hum, the artifact's light brightened before diminishing to a soft, steady glow. "It worked?" Zephyr asked, disbelief etched in every line of his face. Prisha checked the readings, her smile as bright as the artifact's fading glow. "It worked. The signal's been sent. It's heading home," Hank whooped, punching the air with a victory whoop that echoed through the room. "We did it. Toast's on us tonight." Ashar, eyes wide with wonder, bowed his head. "We have witnessed a miracle." "The artifact's journey is ours as well." "Miracle or not," Riven said, brushing her hands together as if dusting off the residue of cosmic chaos, "I'm just glad we're not cosmic toast." Zephyr surveyed the room, his heart lighter than it had been in days. They'd faced the impossible, and somehow they'd managed to stave off disaster with a mix of science, snark, and sheer bloody-mindedness. "All right, team," he said, his voice carrying the warmth of camaraderie in the chilly embassy. "Let's pack it up. We've got a toaster to send off and a universe to keep not imploding." As they moved to shut down the equipment and secure the artifact, Avery sidled up beside him. "You know, Falk, you might just have a future in this diplomacy thing after all." Zephyr chuckled, shaking his head. "Diplomacy? Nah. But saving the universe one chaotic Tuesday at a time. That I can handle." With a final glance at the artifact, now silent and mysterious once more, Zephyr led his team out of the room, leaving behind the echoes of their triumph and the promise of whatever cosmic adventures lay ahead. And perhaps, just maybe, a newfound appreciation for the humble toaster. The aftermath on Titan was less a graceful descent into tranquility and more like a hangover after a bender with a chatty alien toaster. As embers of chaos dimmed in the shadow of Saturn's rings, the human embassy didn't so much bask in glory as it shuffled awkwardly towards a semblance of normalcy. With the cosmic toaster no longer threatening to fry them all, life leaned back into its usual state of barely contained pandemonium. Dr. Zephyr Falk stood in the cluttered confines of what passed for his office, a space that suggested a paper explosion had marred a tech graveyard and spawned a disorganized progeny. He surveyed the chaotic remnants of their recent ordeal with the weary satisfaction of a man who'd wrestled with cosmic mysteries and come out the other side only slightly singed. Riven sauntered in, her entrance marked by a swagger that suggested both triumph and exhaustion. She plunked down into the nearest chair, which squeaked under protest. "So," she drawled, crossing her arms. "We survived communicating with an alien toaster. Guess that's another line for the I'll resume." Zephyr chuckled, leaning back in his chair with a creak that sounded like a ghost sighing. "I'll take it. I'm just happy we didn't get toasted, or become the universe's biggest toaster strudel." "There's always next week," Riven replied, smirking. "I hear we're due for a visit from the Martian ambassador. Maybe they'll bring their own kitchen appliances to haunt us." Zephyr shuddered theatrically. "I'm steering clear of the break room just in case." The human embassy, with its defense systems that worked about as reliably as a drunk on stilts, had somehow gained a new sheen of respect. Word had gotten out about their little extraterrestrial tête-à-tête, and suddenly the bureaucratic fortress was being eyed with a mix of envy and reluctant admiration. Fame might have come from not being incinerated, but Zephyr would take whatever victories he could get. Prisha wandered in, looking like she hadn't slept in a week, but wearing a grin that suggested she'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. "Signal's clear," she announced, holding up a data pad like it was the Holy Grail. "Our alien friend is on its way home, hopefully without any future detours through our galaxy." "Good," Zephyr said, nodding. "Last thing we need is for it to develop a taste for human hospitality, or our wiring." Riven leaned forward, a glint of something insightful in her eyes. "You know, for all the mess, it was kind of amazing. A glimpse of what's out there, what's possible." Zephyr shrugged, trying to play it cool but secretly agreeing. I suppose. Although it might have been nice if the universe had chosen to share its wonders without the threat of turning us into cosmic toast." Prisha snorted. "Yeah, that would have been nice. But where's the fun in that?" "Fun?" Hank's voice piped up from the doorway and he strolled in, hands pocketed, expression as irreverent as ever. "You call wrestling with intergalactic home appliances fun? Remind me never to visit your idea of a theme park." "Hey, we're still here, aren't we?" Prisha shot back. "And no one's being worshipped by toaster enthusiasts. I call that a win." Zephyr waved a dismissive hand. All right, enough about toasters. We've got other things to worry about, like what the hell we're going to say to the higher-ups about all this." Riven raised an eyebrow. "You mean besides we saved your asses and didn't even ask for a raise?" Zephyr chuckled. "Exactly, although a pay bump wouldn't hurt. Or a coffee machine that doesn't taste like it's brewing sewage." The cultists, who'd been as pesky as barnacles on a ship's hull, were finally disbanded. Their ranks scattered, their dreams of cosmic enlightenment put on ice, at least until the next shiny object rolled their way. For now, the embassy was cult-free, and the staff could focus on less existential threats, like figuring out how to fix the coffee machine. Ashar, their erstwhile cosmic guidance counselor, had found a new purpose in spreading the word of what he considered a cosmic miracle. He'd taken to preaching in the courtyard, weaving tales of their toaster triumph with the zeal of a man convinced he'd been touched by something divine. Whether or not anyone listened was another matter. Zephyr watched from the window, sipping a cup of what was optimistically labeled coffee. "Think he'll keep at it?" Riven shrugged. "Probably. Every place needs a good storyteller, keeps the mundanity at bay." "True," Zephyr agreed. "And we could do with a little less mundanity even if it comes with a side of insanity." Prisha joined them, leaning against the window frame. "So what now, fearless leader?" "Back to the grind," Zephyr smiled wearily. "Back to the grind, but maybe with a bit more perspective. We've seen the universe blink and didn't combust. That's something. A short silence, the kind that comes from shared experiences and unspoken camaraderie, settled over them. It was broken, of course, by Hank's usual irreverent timing. "So," he began, eyes gleaming with mischief, "who wants to bet on what cosmic disaster we get to tackle next? I'm putting my money on an alien dishwasher revolt." "Sounds about right," Precia retorted, her grin matching his. "I'll take alien microwaves for 200, Alex." With the artifact's threat averted, the embassy resumed its primary function, pushing paper, sipping bad coffee, and occasionally saving the universe. The cosmic toaster incident had knit them tighter, a team forged in the fires of absurdity. They'd faced down the impossible with humor and humanity, and somehow come out the other side without losing their minds or their lives. As the day waned, casting long shadows through the embassy's corridors, Zephyr found himself back at his desk, a mound of paperwork threatening to topple and bury him alive. But instead of dread, he felt a strange sort of peace. They'd done something remarkable, and though the universe might never know their names, they did, and that was enough. Riven lingered in the doorway, her expression thoughtful. "You know, despite the chaos, I kind of enjoyed it," Zephyr snorted, spoken like a true masochist. "Maybe," she laughed. "But there's something to be said for facing the unknown and living to tell the tale." "Agreed," he said, and raised his mug in a mock toast. "To toaster diplomacy and a future where we're not the universe's burnt offering." Riven clinked her own mug against his, a gesture that spoke of shared battles and uncertain futures. "I'll drink to that." As she left, Zephyr leaned back, the chair groaning in complaint. He gazed out at the great expanse beyond Titan, the stars twinkling like indifferent spectators to their tiny, tumultuous drama. They were a small band of humans at the edge of known space, scrappy, irreverent, and full of flaws. But they were also resourceful and united, a testament to humanity's enduring spirit. They'd faced a cosmic toaster and lived to tell the tale, and that was no small feat. So, as stars blinked in the endless dark and the universe spun on in its eternal dance, Dr. Zephyr Falk let himself dream. Not of glory or fame, but of the continued thrill of the unknown, the next alien appliance that might wander into their orbit, waiting to be understood. And maybe, just maybe, of a future where the coffee didn't taste like reconstituted despair. But as always, one day at a time.